So we're going to start. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and our honorable guests. It's so good to see you, and we are so moved to see this entire lecture theatre is being packed, and with so many distinguished guests attending today's event. Let me introduce myself. My name is Lo Ping Cheng, Lo Ping Cheng, Lo Ping Xiang. I'm the master of ceremony for today. I try to confine my words to be terse. This event is hosted by the Center for Sino-Christian Studies and co-sponsored by the Department of Religion and Philosophy, of both of which I am also a member, and that's why I'm standing here. As I said, I'm going to control my tongue, so the first thing in order is the welcoming address, and we're so honored to have the Chairman of the Council of Hong Kong Baptist University to deliver this welcoming remarks. Mr. Zhang, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I normally don't get the chance of doing the opening remark for a very distinguished academic gathering. As the council chairman, I'm more sort of responsible for the governance of the university. We make it a very, very special point at Baptist University. But nonetheless, and today, I think my friends would know that I normally do not have a script. And today, the university see fit to make sure that I wouldn't say anything wrong, and by providing me with a script, and so that I do not sort of steer into the unknown territory. So I better stick with my script and do what I'm instructed to do. Reverend Dr. Polkinghorne, Professor Yang, Professor Ng, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, and my, I think we are very, very honored to have both Bishop Kong here, the Archbishop Kong as well as the Bishop Paul Kong, both very, very, very friendly colleague, as well as we have Bishop Chan here. Welcome to Hong Kong Baptist University. It is very rare that we have so many bishops attending an event of the Baptist University. Ladies and gentlemen, this is indeed a very happy and special occasion for all of us here at the Hong Kong Baptist University. As most of you know, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary, and this forum is indeed a very, very important part of our year-long celebration. This afternoon, Hong Kong Baptist University is very privileged to have two outstanding scholars to be our speakers today. They are none other than Reverend Dr. John Polkinghorne, who will speak on the dialogue between science and religion and its significance for the academy, and Professor Chen Ning, Nobel laureate in physics, who will engage in an East-West dialogue with Reverend Dr. Polkinghorne on science and religion. They are very, very special speaker for our academic academy, because Professor Yang is our own honorary alumnus. He was conferred an honorary degree of the Doctor of Science in 1999, and Reverend Dr. Polkinghorne will become our honorary alumnus tomorrow. The university will be conferring an honorary doctorate degree in humanities on him at the commencement honorary doctorate conferment ceremony tomorrow. The dialogue, ladies and gentlemen, between science and religion, I was given to understand, has been one of the fastest growing interdisciplinary fields in the West, involving many top scientists and religious studies scholars. However, this important interdisciplinary study is relatively new to academia in Hong Kong and the mainland of China. This is therefore a very precious occasion on which we can benefit from two of the most creative thinkers of our time. The Hong Kong Baptist University is indeed honored to host this lecture and the dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, Albert Einstein once said, and I quote, "Religion without science is blind. Science without religion is lame." This afternoon, we are gathered here to be illuminated on the relationship between science and religion and its significance for the academy. I'm sure our speakers will shed new lights on these issues, and that at the end of this forum, we will all be able to see better and run faster in the race of life and the academia in particular. Thank you very much. Once again, let me welcome all of you to Hong Kong Baptist University.
Today's event is a dream come true. In order to have a dream come true, we need to have a dreamer. And the dreamer is a colleague in our department and the director of Center Sino-Christian Studies, who was dreaming about this, talking with me about 2 years ago. And this is a model for every one of us here, that you can have your dream come true as well. So we'll have now the dreamer of this event, Professor Kang Fee Sing, to introduce the 2 speakers that he dreamed about almost every night since 2 years ago. Professor Kang, please.
I think I'm almost sleepwalking. Hong Kong has been the place where East meets West. Today, on this special occasion, we are witnessing its new role as a place where science meets religion. The dialogue between science and religion in Hong Kong is no mere dialogue. It is being raised to a new height of quadrilogue or multilogue between science and religion and between East and West. Mr. Cheng, President Ng, ladies and gentlemen, I can think of no better scholars to initiate this multilogue at the highest academic level between science and religion in Hong Kong than the Reverend Dr. John Polkinghorne and Professor Chen Ning. This public lecture and dialogue, involving 2 internationally acclaimed scientists from East and West, is the first of its kind in China and in East Asia. The university is indeed honored to host this historic event today. The Reverend Dr. John Polkinghorne will first deliver a lecture on the dialogue between science and religion and its significance for the academy. As an eminent scientist, he was elected a Fellow of Royal Society, joining the ranks of Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, James Clerk Maxwell, and Stephen Hawking. Then, as an outstanding scientist-theologian, he was awarded the Templeton Prize, regarded as the Nobel Prize in religion, and has poured out, within a short span of 20 years, more than 20 books on science and religion, many of which have been published by prestigious university presses. He has helped, in no small measure, to establish the new, respectable interdisciplinary field in science and religion. Indeed, Harvard University has recently announced the creation of a newly endowed Watson Professorship in Science and Religion, joining Princeton, Cambridge, Oxford, Berkeley, and others in affirming the discipline as a legitimate academic field. I'm sure the audience can't wait to hear Dr. Polkinghorne tell us why the science-religion dialogue is significant for these leading academic institutions. Professor Chen Ning will then engage in the dialogue on this theme with Dr. John Polkinghorne after the lecture. Professor Yang, Nobel laureate in physics, US National Medal of Science laureate, and member of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. He indeed needs no further introduction. If I may, I would mention only that Professor Yang's doctoral supervisor, the famous Enrico Fermi, once advised him, as a young man, work on practical problems. Do not worry about things of fundamental importance. For all his admiration of Fermi, Professor Yang did not seem to take this bit of advice too seriously. In fact, it was precisely his doing away with the fundamental parity conservation law, which physicists before him took to be too intuitive to deserve scrutiny, that won him the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1957. And perhaps in recent years, the still young at heart Professor Yang has been ignoring this same advice again. He has expressed his keen interest in something of even more fundamental importance, namely religion. In very recent lectures at Penang and Hong Kong UST, for instance, Professor Yang has spoken about his interest in the relation between science and religion. It was said that Professor Yang, as a young theoretical physicist, experienced some difficulties with experimental physics. His fellow students used to say, where there was a bang, there was yang. Perhaps they will now say, where there is discussion of God and a Big Bang, there is yang. John Polkinghorne and Professor Yang are old friends. Their friendship began more than 40 years ago during their Princeton days. There are hundreds of important titles of science and religion in the university and seminary libraries of Hong Kong. But this afternoon, we have a direct East-West dialogue on science and religion, or rather, a warm conversation between two old friends on things of fundamental importance. Important to all of us in the academy and important to all humankind. We are truly privileged to have this opportunity to listen to them. On behalf of the audience, I would like to say thank you, Dr. John Polkinghorne, and thank you, Professor Yang Chen Ning.
We'd like to offer our gifts to the two speakers today. So please, Council Chairman, Mr. Zhang, and President Ng, can you please come forward so that you can represent the university to present our souvenirs. First of all, Council Chairman Mr. Zhang will present a souvenir to Reverend Dr. Polkinghorne. And then President Ng, on behalf of our university, will present a souvenir to Professor Yang. Stay behind, stay behind. We now have to take a few pictures. The first, we have altogether 3 sessions of picture taking. The first session, Professor Yang and then Dr. Polkinghorne, President, Chairman, and the organizer of the event, they'll take the first picture. All right, please stay, and will all our vice presidents also join us, and also our emeritus president, Daniel Jie, please also join us, our acting head of department, Liu Zheng, and also the Dean of Arts Faculty, Professor Zhong, Deans of Science Faculty, Professor Rick Wong. Please also come forward. And also Dr. Guan, who is also working with us on this project. Where are you? Guan Kaiman. And then we have many VIP guests today, so we want to also invite them to come over to take pictures with us. It's a rare opportunity where the academy meets the religious bodies. So this is the occasion. Please, we want to invite for Anglican Church, Archbishop Peter Kwong and Bishop Paul Kwong. For Catholic Church, Cardinal Zin. For the Orthodox Church, Metropolitan Nikitas. And also a number of theological schools, President and Vice President of Chinese Graduate School of Theology, Dr. Carver Yu and Wilson Chow, please. Baptist Theological Seminary, the Vice President, Joshua Cho, and also representing Taiwan Theological College, Dr. Tsai Mo Tang, please. And also that, sorry, I just announced the religious body, but also for academy, we have the honor of the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the Chinese University, Professor Liu Bawei. Is he here? Yes, please come forward as well. And then the former Dean of the Science Faculty of Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Professor Michael Loy. And at Chinese University, Professor Thomas C.W. Mack, who is also a member of the Chinese Academy of Science. Oh, Professor Professor Sham as well. Please come forward. Oh, I'm sorry, missed another one. Representing the Baptist Convention of Hong Kong, Reverend Dr. Zhu Wuping. In order for science and religion to have a dialogue, you need to use a little imagination. And you need to use a little imagination as you are going to participate in this meaningful event. And the imagination I'm asking you to have is an artistic imagination. Now you have to imagine that you are now sitting in an opera house. What you have just witnessed is only an overture. A long overture indeed, but just only an overture. And now it's the time for Act 1. The curtain has raised, and we'll be about to have the Act 1 being performed. Reverend Dr. Polkinghorne, we've been anticipating for this moment for a long time. Please come to share your thoughts with us. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Reverend Polkinghorne.
I hope you'll excuse me if I sit down to speak. I'm having back problems. And though I lose in authority from not standing, I gain in comfort. It's a very great pleasure for me to be in Hong Kong and a great privilege to have the chance of speaking to you this afternoon. And it's a special pleasure and a special privilege to do so in the presence of Professor Yang, who was such an outstanding, insightful leader of the community of particle physicists, in which I worked as a humble toiler for 25 years. It's very good to see him again. In my own country and throughout the world, the 20th century saw a vast expansion of access to university education. Governments were willing, largely for what they saw as practical reasons, to provide the financial resources needed for that expansion. Politicians understood that graduates were needed to enable the development of a prosperous nation. Now, while that is true, and it is certainly to be welcomed, I think it would be a bad mistake to think that the principal role of the academy is to facilitate increase in the gross national product. A different purpose, and in my view the most important purpose, of the academy is the discovery and the propagation of knowledge. Many other goods will follow from fulfilling that main objective, but their continuance depends, in the long run, on not losing sight of this, the central aim and justification for the life of the academy. And so I want to start at the outset of this lecture my strong belief in the value of knowledge for knowledge's own sake. I want also to state my strong belief that ultimately knowledge is one. Academic life today is subject to many severe pressures in the direction of intense specialization. Now, I am quite happy to recognize that engaging in depth with a specific topic teaches one something valuable about knowledge, something that cannot be learnt in any other way. But the insight that is gained then has to be set in a wider context. There is a real danger that the modern academy will be made up of people who simply know more and more about less and less. A true university is much more than a loose assembly of specialized research institutes located on the same campus merely for reasons of administrative and logistic convenience. There has to be a genuine intellectual exchange between all parts of the academy, a form of interdisciplinary discourse by means of which all will be enriched. And in that activity, I believe that the dialogue between science and religion has an important part to play, or, speaking more properly, the dialogue between science and theology, since the latter's intellectual reflection on religious experience parallels science's reflection on the physical world. If the true university is to be the institutional expression of the unity of knowledge, it must include theology or religious studies among its faculties. So much for the general premise on which this lecture is based. Let me start my more detailed discussion in that part of the academy that I know the best, namely the Faculty of Science. Now, scientific research is hard work. Like any other worthwhile activity, there is a good deal of wearisome routine to be endured. And occasionally there is frustration, as what seemed to be a good idea in the morning evaporates under closer scrutiny in the cold light of the afternoon. So why do we do it? The answer is because scientists want to understand the world, and the reward for their labor are those moments of discovery in which some new insight is gained into the wonderful structure of the universe and its remarkable and fruitful history. At least, that is how the scientists understand what is happening. They believe that they are engaged in a search for true knowledge concerning the nature of the physical world in which we live. However, the different parts of the academy provide different perspectives, and sometimes things may not appear to be the same, at least at first glance, when viewed from a different angle. In the 20th century, a number of philosophers felt that they needed to disabuse the scientists of what they considered to be a naive belief. These philosophers offered a variety of alternative suggestions about what was actually happening in scientific research. The positivists suggested that science is simply about correlating the results of experimental measurements. It was not at all clear why this rather banal task was to be considered worth much effort. It is one thing to work hard if there really are quarks and gluons and one can learn about their properties, but it is quite another thing if the actual characters in the scientific story are simply marks on photographic plates or scale readings on instruments. Why should one bother very much about them? It seems to me that the positivists totally failed to give an account of science that was at all adequate to explain why many people devoted their lives to its pursuit. A somewhat more exciting account was offered by the instrumentalists, They too did not believe that science could tell you what the world is actually like, but they did at least recognize that it enabled you to get things done. According to them, there might not really be electrons, but at least there were electron microscopes. In their view, science was about pragmatic success, rather than about gaining a true understanding of nature. Yet instrumentalism failed to explain how it was that those microscopes worked so well. Surely the obvious reason is that there actually are electrons, with the properties that have been assumed in designing the device. Once again, science was offering an explanation that fell short of what scientists actually experience in the pursuit of their subject. The fact is, of course, that scientists are not simply concerned with getting things done. That's technology. They want to understand the nature of things and how they work. The way that science achieves the prize of understanding is subtle. People sometimes think that the scientific method for finding truth depends simply on checking that the inescapable predictions of theory fit exactly with the clear results of experiment. But in actual fact, the matter is more complex than that, for theory and experiment intertwine each other in delicate ways. There are, of course, no interesting scientific facts that are not already interpreted facts. Appeal has to be made to theory in order to understand what it is that instruments are actually measuring, and in turn, theories have to be adjusted and corrected in the light of experimental findings. This interrelationship between theory and experiment involves an irreducible degree of circularity into the scientific procedure. Nevertheless, scientists have good reason to believe that this circularity is benign rather than vicious. Two particular kinds of experience strongly reinforce the belief that science is not just making up a story about the world, but truly discovering what it is like. One is the continual element of surprise that enters into scientific investigations. Prior expectation of what might be found often need to be subjected to radical revision as the consequence of the way things are actually found to be. Nature is recalcitrant very often to our expectations. And an outstanding example was when Professor Yang, together with Professor Li, showed that there is an intrinsic handedness in nature, a preference for the left hand over the right, something that people had previously supposed just to be impossible. This scientific experience of surprising novelty also implies corollaries of wider significance than for science itself. First of all, science shows us that there is no universal epistemology, no universal way of knowing everything. Entities can only be known in accordance with their actual nature, and so different entities must be known in different ways. The everyday world can be known in the clear and determinate way that Newtonian thinking had presumed. But the cloudy and fitful quantum world can only be known in its Heisenbergian uncertainty. Secondly, there is no simple characterization of rational expectation. No one expected handedness to be present in nature. Consequently, the natural question for a scientist to ask, not only about science but about things in general, is not, is it reasonable, as if we had prior knowledge of the necessary shape of reason. But the instinctive scientific question is, what makes you think that might be the case? You see, the latter question is on the one hand open to new possibilities, but it is also demanding, and rightly demanding, in requiring evidence for what is being asserted. These two insights of no universal epistemology and openness to the unexpected in rational thinking are important in the science and religion discussion, and they offer theology both an opportunity and a challenge to which I believe it should be happy to respond. I'll say more about that in a minute. The second experience that confirms the realist interpretation of science is the manner in which ideas discovered in one context prove their long-term fruitfulness by explaining other phenomena of a quite different kind. My great scientific hero is Paul Dirac, one of the founding figures of quantum theory, and he discovered his famous equation of the electron by considering how to combine quantum theory and relativity theory in a consistent fashion. He then immediately found that his new theory explained a known, but until then inexplicable, anomaly in the electron's magnetic properties. And later on, he recognized that the equation also implied the existence of antimatter, a previously unknown possibility. Now, such long-term, fertile explanatory power is very persuasive of the truthfulness of the ideas involved. Because of the subtle circularity of the interweaving of theory and experiment, science cannot assert that it possesses absolute proof beyond a peradventure, logical necessity, absolute proof of its conclusions. Yet it can, and it should, lay claim to the attainment of well-motivated belief, even if that belief will never amount to a total grasp of all truth about the physical world. There is always the possibility of some new phenomenon waiting discovery around the next experimental corner, which will then cause physicists to revise and to deepen their understanding. The true achievement that science can claim is verisimilitude, the making of reliable maps of physical reality, fully adequate on a specified scale, but not exact on every scale. As part of its account of physical reality, science often has to speak in terms of unseen realities, entities whose existence is inferred from the explanatory power they convey in relation to more directly visible and accessible phenomena. For example, the current candidates for the role of basic constituents of matter are the celebrated quarks and gluons of elementary particle physics. Not only have these not been observed individually, but it is believed that they never will be, since the forces that bind them together to make protons and neutrons and so on are thought to be too strong to allow the necessary decomposition, a property that we call quark confinement. Nevertheless, particle physicists are totally convinced that quarks really exist. And the basis for this belief is that it explains, in an elegant and concise way, many of the properties of those nuclear particles that are directly accessible to direct experimental investigation. In other words, belief in the unseen reality of quarks and gluons derives from the deep intelligibility that this assumption affords. And here again, I think, we see the possibility of a cousinly relationship between science and religion, as theology seeks to speak of the unseen reality, capital U, capital R, the unseen reality of God. It too can base its case on the claim that theistic belief makes sense of great swathes of human experience. These will include not only the widely testified experience of encounter with the sacred, but also, interestingly enough, they include the experience of doing science itself, when that experience is set in a deeper context of intelligibility. The fact is, I think, that those who are imbued with a thirst for understanding, that thirst which so powerfully motivates scientists, will find that it cannot be quenched by science alone. The truth of the matter is that science has purchased its very great success essentially by the modesty of its ambition. It only considers a certain impersonal kind of encounter with the world around us, namely that encounter which treats reality objectively, as an it, you might say, available to be manipulated and put to the test as we may choose. This restriction gives science its secret weapon, the method of experimental interrogation, from which so much of its success derives. Yet we all know that there are other equally valid ways of engaging with reality, in which the encounter is personal, a meeting with a thou rather than an it, one might say. And in that personal realm of human experience, testing has to give way to trusting. Another way of characterizing the self-limitation of science is to recognize that it confines itself to asking a particular kind of question, essentially the how question. By what process things happen. And of course, this is a valuable kind of inquiry to pursue, but it is not the only issue relevant to gaining understanding. There is also the why question of whether there is meaning and purpose present in what is happening. Science brackets out this kind of inquiry, that we know perfectly well that one may ask and answer both how and why about the same event. And indeed, we need to do so if we are fully to understand it. The kettle boils, both because burning gas heats the water and because I want to make a cup of tea. Yet there must be a degree of consonance between the answers given to the two questions. The person who asserts their intention of making a cup of tea proposes to do so by putting the kettle in the refrigerator is rightly suspect. The search for consonance between the insights offered by science and by religion is an extremely significant and important part of the dialogue between them. And the Academy offers many resources for assessing these questions of consonance. So my argument so far is that the impersonal insights of science need to be complemented by the personal insights of other kinds of human search for truth and understanding, which are proper concerns of other parts of the Academy. And I want to explore what a faculty of theology or religious studies can offer in this respect. The first insight it can offer, I think, is to explain, in fact, why science is possible at all, possible in the deep and extensive way that it is. Of course, we can all see that the evolutionary necessity for survival can explain why human beings are able to make rough and ready sense of everyday phenomena. Yet it is difficult to believe that our ability to understand the subatomic world of quantum physics and the cosmic realm of curved space-time, both regimes which are remote from direct experience on everyday events, and both requiring for their understanding highly counterintuitive modes of thought, it is difficult to believe that understanding quantum theory and relativity theory is simply a happy spin-off from our ancestors having had to dodge saber-toothed tigers. And not only is the world deeply rationally transparent to scientific inquiry, but it's also rationally beautiful, time and again affording scientists the reward of wonder as a recompense for the labor of their research. In fundamental physics, it is the proven technique of discovery to seek theories whose expression is in terms of equations possessing the unmistakable character of mathematical beauty, since it has been found time and again that only such theories will turn out to have the long-term fruitfulness that persuades us of their verisimilitude. I've already spoken to Paul Dirac. I think he's the greatest physicist whom I've known personally. And he once said that it is more important to have beauty in your equations than to have them fit experiment. So there. Now, of course, Dirac did not mean that empirical adequacy could be dispensed with. No physicist could possibly think that. What he did mean was this: if at first sight your equations didn't seem to fit the experimental facts, that was, of course, disappointing, but it was not absolutely necessarily fatal. Perhaps you had not made the right approximation in trying to solve the equations, or found the appropriate solution. Perhaps the experiments were wrong. We have known that happen more than once in physics. At least there was some sort of residual hope. But you see, if your equations were ugly, there was no hope. They couldn't possibly be right. The whole history of modern physics was against you. And Dirac made his great discoveries by a lifelong and highly successful quest for mathematical beauty. And he once said, ironically I'm afraid, he once said it was a very profitable religion to hold. Now, why deep science is possible, and why its success intimately involves the apparently abstract discipline of mathematics, as the prime means for unlocking the secrets of the universe, those are surely significant questions about the nature of the world in which we live. Dirac's brother-in-law, Eugene Wigner, who also won a Nobel Prize for physics, once asked, why is mathematics so unreasonably effective? Why does this abstract subject prove the key to unlocking the secrets of the physical world? Now, science itself is unable to offer an explanation of this profound character of the laws of nature, for it has to treat them simply as given on the unexplained basis that it has to assume for its explanation of the details of process. Theoretical physicists rejoice that mathematics is unreasonably effective, but theoretical physics does not explain in a fundamental sense why that is so. But it seems intellectually very unsatisfactory, lazy in fact, to leave the matter there, as if the possibility of science was simply a happy accident. Now, I believe that a religious understanding renders the intelligibility of the universe itself intelligible. For it says that the world, as explored by science, is shot through with rational beauty precisely because the mind of its creator lies behind its wonderful order. Now, I am both a scientist and a Christian believer, in fact, a physicist and a priest. When they are told this, people sometimes look at me with a kind of surprise and questioning and, frankly, suspicion that they might feel if I said I was a vegetarian butcher. And behind this attitude, there lies the belief that there is some sort of incompatibility between science and religion, as if they were supposed to be at war with each other, and someone ought to decide clearly on which side of the battle line one is going to take one's stand. I think that this conflict picture of the relationship between science and religion is a very bad mistake. I believe that they are friends, basically, and not foes. And I think that the fundamental reason for their friendship is that both of them are engaged in the search for truth, and both believe there is a truth to be found, though their concerns are with very different aspects of the truth: science with impersonal truth, as I've already suggested, and religion with truth about persons and about the transpersonal reality of God. I also believe that science and religion are both seeking truth through the quest for motivated belief. In the case of science, that might not seem a very contentious claim to make. But what about religion? Isn't it based on faith? Isn't faith a question of shutting your mind and believing what you're told in submission to some unquestionable religious authority? I answer yes to the first of these questions because I think that religion is based on faith, but I think that the nature of faith is a commitment to what we have good reason to believe is true. And so I emphatically answer no to the second question. I do not at all think that you have to commit intellectual suicide to be a religious believer. In fact, I couldn't be a religious believer if I thought that was required of me. If religious belief turned out to be nothing but an irrational fideism, then, of course, theology, or indeed religious studies, would have no proper place in the truth-seeking community of the academy. But I say that faith, too, is based on motivated belief. And I want in my speaking and writing and thinking to explore with careful scrupulosity the motivations for my Christian beliefs, because only in that way could they truly be part of the search for truth. In fact, I particularly reject the claim that's sometimes made that science is concerned with fact, while religion is simply concerned with opinion, public fact versus private opinion. We've already seen that scientific facts are already interpreted facts, intertwining experiment, which is sort of bare facts, and theory, which is informed opinion. And religious beliefs are not mere fideistic assertions, but there is an appeal to motivating experience. both to the foundational events of a religious tradition, in the case of Christianity, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and to a continuing engagement with sacred reality, conveyed through a life of prayer, worship, and obedience. Understood in this way, religious revelation is not a matter of infallible propositional truth conveyed in some wholly mysterious manner, but is the record of those events and persons through which the sacred reality of God has been most clearly and accessibly conveyed. Scripture is not a divine textbook in which are written all the answers to the examination questions of life, which then simply have to be memorized. But Scripture is the laboratory notebook, one might say, giving the details of those critical experiments through which God has been encountered and known. Now, if science and religion are friends and partners in the search for truth and understanding, in the way that I have suggested, then they will have things to say to each other in a fruitful dialogue. I want to describe some of these exchanges. For its part, science can tell religion what the natural world is like, what its past history has been. And religious people need to listen carefully and respectfully to what science has to say in this respect, and to welcome the insights that it offers. If they are truly seeking to serve the God of truth, they should welcome truth from whatever source it comes, and certainly they need not fear it in any form. Some truth, not of course all truth, but some truth certainly comes from science. And one of its most important discoveries, I think, has been that the universe has a history, the discovery of deep time, as people sometimes say. The world has looked very different in the past to the way that it looks today. The universe, as we know it, originated in the fiery singularity of the Big Bang some 13.7 billion years ago. Notice that 13.7. Cosmologists are getting really very accurate, or believe they are. I think they're probably right. It all started very simple, for the early universe was just an almost uniform expanding ball of energy. But today, that same universe is richly structured and complex, with the human brain, in fact, the most complicated system ever encountered so far in the course of science's exploration of the world. The fact that that initial ball of energy was eventually able to give rise to beings who are aware of their cosmic home and able to discover many of its secrets is an astonishing story of unfolding fertility, certainly compatible with the theistic belief that a divine purpose lies behind the history of the world. I think the most extraordinary event in cosmic history, of which we have knowledge anyway, has been the appearance of persons here on planet Earth. People able to be aware of themselves, aware of the world, and to understand it. In human beings, the universe became aware of itself, and of course science became a possibility. You may recall that Blaise Pascal, the great French thinker, said human beings are tiny beings on this enormous scale of the world. They are just reeds, frail reeds. But we are thinking reeds. And because of that, we are more than all the stars. For we know them and ourselves, and the stars know nothing. And I think that's right. It turned out that this was only possible because the laws of nature, the laws of nuclear physics, were just right to produce an enhancement effect, a resonance, as we say in the trade, at just the right energy to produce carbon. If nuclear physics had been a little bit different, then there would have been no carbon, no you and me. There are many, many such fine-tunings, exacting requirements of the laws of nature that we recognize as having been indispensable for the development of the universe in the fruitful way that has actually happened. The most exacting requirement for what has been called anthropic potentiality relates to the recently discovered dark energy associated with space itself and in part driving the universe's expansion. The magnitude of this dark energy is at least 54 orders of magnitude, that's a factor of 10 to the minus 54, smaller than would have been expected on general grounds. A vital fine-tuning, since anything larger would have blown the universe apart so rapidly as to destroy the possibility of its forming any complex structures. There are many, many of these considerations. And such a remarkable set of facts surely calls for some explanation. Science by itself, in my view, cannot offer it, since it has to take the laws of nature as it finds them. Theistic belief, however, offers such an explanation, for its concept of the divine purpose lying behind the history of the world enables it to interpret the built-in fruitfulness of the universe, which has allowed the development of carbon-based life, as being the endowment of fertility bestowed on the cosmos by its creator. The second thing that science tells us about the cosmic story is that the processes that have been at work throughout its history have been evolutionary in character. Evolutionary processes means that there has been a subtle interplay between the lawful regularity of nature and the particular and exploratory character of individual happenings. Evolution is sometimes described as resulting from the combined operation of chance and necessity. Here, chance doesn't stand for capriciousness, it stands simply for the contingency of much of what has actually happened. So vast is the range of possibilities that even in 13.7 billion years of cosmic history, only a small fraction of what might have happened has in fact happened. Necessity stands for the reliable regularities present in nature, which provide the context for these contingent events. And it is this evolutionary dialectic between necessity and chance that has been the source from which novelty emerged in cosmic history, whether it was in the formation of the first stars and galaxies, in the beginnings of terrestrial life, in the development of terrestrial life, or the coming to be of self-conscious humanity. It is a deep insight of contemporary science that the realms in which true novelty can emerge are always held in regimes which we may describe as being at the edge of chaos, a mixture of order and disorder, regimes in which chance and necessity inextricably intertwine. A regime that was all necessity would be too rigid for anything really new to happen. If there were no genetic mutation, there would be no new forms of life. A regime that was all chance would be too haphazard for anything new to persist. If genetic mutations were prolific and happened all the time, no species would be established on which natural selection could operate. Now, people sometimes think that evolution is the issue on which science and religion can never find agreement. There is a caricature account which sees the publication in 1859 of Darwin's great book on the origin of species as being the final parting of the ways between science and religion. This picture is ignorant and far from the truth. For from the start, some religious people were wise enough to see that the theory of evolution does not conflict with creation, but rather it tells us something about the way in which the Creator had chosen to work. A clergyman friend of Darwin's, Charles Kingsley, said that though God could no doubt have produced a ready-made world, it had turned out that the Creator had done something cleverer than that, in making a world in which, through the evolutionary exploration of potentiality with which creatures have been endowed, creatures could make themselves. That's the phrase that encapsulates the theological understanding of evolutionary process, the process by which creatures are allowed to make themselves. It turned out that not only has science given religion new and deeper insights into the ways of creation, but it also offered religion some assistance with the latter's greatest problem. What is that greatest problem? Well, surely it is the problem of the evil and suffering present in the world. If God is good and all-powerful, as religious people claim, how does it come about that disease and disaster are so widespread in a world asserted to be a divine creation? This problem, I believe, holds many people back from religious belief, and it troubles those of us who are religious believers. It doesn't have a simple one-line solution, but some help arises from recognizing that though a world in which creatures are given the freedom to be themselves and to make themselves, that kind of world is a great good, it also has the shadow side of a necessary cost. Evolutionary processes produced remarkable fruitfulness through the emergence of new kinds of life, but inescapably there will also be ragged edges and blind alleys. We tend to think that it would have surely have been easy for God to separate the good and the bad in the processes of the world, to keep the former and throw away the latter. But science helps us to see how delicately intertwined and subtly interconnected are natural processes, so that a simple division of this kind into good and bad is not coherently possible. To take a simple example, the engine that has driven the remarkable 3 to 4 billion year history of life on Earth has, of course, been genetic mutation, continually producing new kinds of life to be sifted and preserved through natural selection in a reliable environment. But if germ cells are to be able to mutate and produce new biological possibilities, then it must also be the case that some somatic cells, body cells, can mutate. And sometimes this will result in malignancy. You can't have one without the other. The anguishing fact of cancer in the world is not gratuitous, something that a creator who was a bit more competent or a bit less callous could easily have eliminated. It is the shadow side of fertility, the necessary cost of a world in which creatures are able to make themselves. Science does not remove all religion's perplexities about the ills of the world, but it does offer it some assistance in wrestling with them. So there are real gifts that scientific understanding gives to religious people and religious understanding. But in the dialogue between science and religion, what gift could religion possibly offer to science by way of return? Certainly not to seek to answer science's questions for it. We have every reason to believe that scientifically posable questions will receive scientifically statable answers, even if these answers may at times be hard to find. However, we have already seen there is very good reason to believe that there are many questions that are meaningful to state and necessary to ask, but which are not scientific in character, and so lie beyond science's self-limited power to address and respond to. Hence the need for those seeking understanding through and through to look to additional sources of insight beyond those which science can provide. A particular interest this afternoon are what one might call meta-questions, queries that relate to issues that arise out of the experience of doing science, questions that relate to issues that arise out of the experience of doing science, but which take us beyond, that's the meaning of meta, take us beyond the legitimate domain of scientific explanation. And the gift that theology offers to science in their mutual dialogue within the academy is the deeper and wider intelligibility that I believe a theistic metaphysics can offer. One could say that the practice of science has revealed a world whose rational order and rational transparency and rational beauty is shot through with signs of mind. And I've already suggested that religion proposes this fact should be understood as representing an encounter with the mind of the Creator. The pursuit of science requires of the scientist a faith commitment that the universe is endowed with a deep structure to which the human mind has access. Without that affirmation, implicit or explicit, fundamental science would have seemed a hopeless enterprise. The religious belief that the world is indeed a cosmos, because it is also a creation, underwrites this basic and necessary scientific conviction. To put the matter in another way, a word that is frequently used by scientists in their informal conversations, but never, of course, in their formal papers submitted to the learned journals, that word is wonder. The experience of wonder at the rational beauty of the universe affords scientists a recompense for all the labor and frustration inevitably involved in doing research. And I believe that whether the scientists involved know it or not, the religious person will rightly interpret this basic scientific experience of wonder as being an implicit act of worship of the Creator. In the exchange of gifts between science and religion that has been briefly sketched, one sees how these two quests for truth and understanding are not competitive rivals between which we have to choose, but they complement each other as partners in the great human quest for understanding. If we are truly to understand the world, I believe that we shall need to look at the universe with both the eye of science and with the eye of religion. This binocular vision will enable us to see and comprehend much more than we could ever manage with either eye on its own. The fundamental reason why the dialogue between science and religion rightly must find a place in the academy is that the richness of reality is such as to demand that all its diverse dimensions, scientific, aesthetic, cultural, ethical, and religious, find their proper place and recognition by being represented in that truth-seeking community. Certainly, science by itself could never be enough. It trawls experience with a coarse-grained net. Many things of the utmost significance and importance slip through its wide meshes. Ask a scientist, as a scientist, to tell you all that he or she can about music, and they will say that it is neural response to the impact of sound waves on the eardrum. And of course that is true, and in its own way worth knowing. But ask the same scientist as a person to tell you all that they can about music, and they will surely have much more to say about the deep mystery of how a temporal succession of bursts of vibrating air can convey to us a profound and, I believe, true experience of timeless beauty. The university exists to bring together the insights of all truth-seeking investigations, and within that broad and deep embrace, there is an indispensable place for the dialogue between science and religion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Polkinghorne. In spite of the fact we have been sitting here for some time listening to your wisdom, we still do not have enough. We feel like this is only an appetizer. But of course, we cannot keep you for long. So the only way to solve our hunger problem is turn to page 12 and 13 of this booklet, in which some of the major publications of Dr. Polkinghorne are listed. And I actually had the chance of talking to Dr. Polkinghorne before this event. If you are a theologian or if you're a scientist, you know where to start. I mean, you spot the titles and you know which one will interest you. But if you are neither a theologian nor a scientist, then where should you start? I asked him, and he advised the last one, the one which is in the right-hand lower corner, the one with the title Quacks, Chaos, and Christianity. That will be the most accessible one if you are neither a theologian nor a scientist. Talking about the publications of Dr. Polkinghorne, in fact, I checked our university computer last night. In our library, we have 27 entries under John C. Polkinghorne. This is the largest collection among all Hong Kong libraries. The next university has only 23 entries. Talking about this event, I want to let you know that this is not an accident, that this event happens at this university and also with the involvement of the Center of Science and Christian Studies and also co-sponsored by the Department of Religion and Philosophy. This is because among our faculty members, we have a large number of us who has background in science, in spite of the fact they are now professional scholar in religious studies or professional philosophers. Professor Kang has a background in physics and mathematics, and Professor Liu Zheng, the acting head of our department, studied mathematics and even earned a master in mathematics before turning to philosophy. And we have three colleagues who study engineering. One of them even was a practicing engineer before turning to theological education. And another one of us studied biology in undergraduate education. So you see, we do have this kind of broad-minded learning that we're interested to cross-discipline and to integrate our faith and learning and religion and philosophy. And so this event happening in front of you today is not a mere coincidence. There's a deep reason for this to happen at our university. You are actually right now in intermission time, but we cannot afford to let you go. We have to start Act 2 right away. So we want to invite Professor Chen Ning. Please come forward to join us. Professor Yang was part of our dream for about 2 years. And Professor Yang needs no introduction, but actually we are so excited that he can be here, especially about 2 months ago. We read in a newspaper, Hong Kong newspaper, there was reported that Professor Yang was seriously interested in thinking about issues in religion. And according to newspaper report, Professor Yang says that to his mind, issues in religion and issues in science are very similar. And so we're so excited by reading those remarks, and then we confirm that our dreams indeed is a correct dream. Now with this dialogue, which is the Act 2 of today's event, we will also have Professor Zhang Gamqing to be the facilitator of this dialogue. And after this dialogue, we also allow some time for question and answers. So be prepared. If you have some questions, please jot it down, organize it, and so that later on you can have the chance to raise it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the second, if I may say, climax of today's events. A dialogue to which I think we are all eagerly looking forward. Now, Professor Yang has already joined Professor Polkinghorne, and is going to engage in a East-West, I think is also a science-religion dialogue today here at Hong Kong Baptist University. And without further ado, I think if I may, I first pass the microphone to Professor Polkinghorne.
I thought Professor Yang was going to make a sort of introductory few remarks to set out his position, or do you want to go straight into a conversation? The latter, is it? Okay. Well, can I ask you, I'm suggesting that the laws of nature have a character about them in their very, very wonderful order and in their amazing, fruitful consequences that means that it's not satisfactory to treat them simply as given brute facts. They seem to point beyond themselves. And that seems to me to point one beyond science. Of course, we wouldn't know about the laws of nature without science, to point beyond them to some further kind of explanation. Of course, I'm offering a theistic explanation. But would you agree that there is more to be told than science on its own can find to say?
I'm not sure I know how to answer your question. My personal relationship with the religion is undergoing a transformation as I grow older. I think perhaps I could relate to you some aspects of this transformation.
Please, absolutely, yes.
It's of course a personal matter, and it has many aspects. So I'll just mention two aspects. Throughout my career, I'm a teacher and a research physicist. And you started your career also as a research physicist. As a researcher, when one encounters an understanding of some secret of nature, that is a very humbling experience. Reverend Polkinghorne has mentioned Paul Dirac, one of the great physicists of the 20th century. He was particularly famous for the second equation on this screen, which is now called the Dirac equation. The first equation, E equal to mc squared, is familiar to everyone in the audience. It had a tremendous impact on the fate of mankind. When that equation was written down in 1905 by Einstein, Dirac was 3 years old. 23 years later, he wrote down the second equation. You recognize E, you recognize mc squared are both already in Einstein's equation. What Dirac did was he added this alpha and beta, very simple mathematical structures, and it's a miracle. It is a miracle because through this ingenious idea, Dirac could predict that the fundamental particle electron, each of us has billions and billions of them in our bodies, are tops, are spinning tops. So these billions and billions of electrons in each of us is actually a spinning top. But more than that, he could calculate from that simple equation how fast each of these spinning electrons was spinning and how much magnetic field is created by that. That calculation resulted, through subsequent development, into a precise number for the magnetic strength of each electron. And through subsequent experiments in many laboratories all over the world, that calculation is confirmed to the accuracy of at least 11 decimal points. To appreciate the meaning of that, to appreciate how accurate it is, let us imagine that this hall be filled with marbles, and you are required to count these marbles one by one, and there will be something like several hundred billion marbles. You are required to count them one by one and tell us the precise number down to the last marble, a 12-digit number, and you have to be correct for every digit. And that is the accuracy that simple-looking Dirac equation was able to create. The beauty, the elegance, the grandeur of this deep penetration of the secret of nature, when any scientist, upon confronting it, is an absolutely awe-inspiring experience. And each of the science students, in learning about the Dirac equation, had this experience. But in my old age, I understand more. I understand that feeling of awe-inspiring experience in seeing something which perhaps is a secret which should not be seen by a mortal man. I understand that is a deeply religious experience. A second aspect of my transformation comes about because of these thoughts. As I reflect on human history, I find that agriculture in early human civilization is about 10,000 years old. That is 100 centuries. Over the first 99 of these centuries, progress in every sphere of human activities has been gradual and slow. Then, in the last of these 100 centuries, the 20th century, progress exploded. While in the year 1900, the fastest way of traveling was on horseback at perhaps 8 kilometers per hour, today we fly at 800 kilometers per hour. While in the year 1900, the telephone was a new toy, today several 100 million cell phones are in use all over the world. While in the year 1900, the best computational aid was the abacus. Today, with the supercomputer performing trillions of operations per second. While in the year 1900, diabetes, the dreaded disease, was incurable. Today, we have insulin, we have antibiotics, we have magnetic resonance imaging, we have organ transplants, etc., etc., more than tripling human lifespan. While in the year 1900, man was earthbound, today, man has walked on the moon. While in the year 1900, man made TNT bombs weighing 500 pounds. Today, the explosive power of a hydrogen bomb is that of 20 billion pounds of TNT. All of these miracles, good or bad, were consequences of the unprecedented development of science and technology in one century, the 20th. So I often reflect. It is as if mankind is in a fast train, propelled onwards by science and technology, rushing on and accelerating. Would the train crash? Of course, nobody can answer that question. But the question generates uncertainty and anxiety, especially in my old age. And reflecting on it, I realize that anxiety must be one of the fundamental reasons for the deep faith of the religiously devout. I therefore agree with Dr. Polkinghorne that there is urgent need for increased dialogue between science and religion. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to just tell you something you perhaps don't know, that if you go into Westminster Abbey when you're next in London, and you look for the memorial slab to Paul Dirac, you will find the Dirac equation inscribed upon that slab. I don't know what most tourists make of the inscription, but you and I will be pleased, except that it's written not in Dirac's notation, which you rightly used up there, alphas and betas, but with the gamma notation. There was a big debate about that, and the Dean of Westminster took advice, and I told him to write it in the Dirac form, but he didn't accept the advice. I think you make a very important point about the extraordinarily accelerating science and technology. Science gives us knowledge, technology comes along and turns that knowledge into power. I think that knowledge is always a good gift. It is better to know than to be ignorant. But power is an ambiguous gift, because not everything that can be done should be done. And I think you've put your finger, if I may say so, on a very important aspect of the dialogue and indeed the interaction between science and religion. Religious people are not the only people who have insights into ethics and what should be done, but they have a long tradition of thinking about those questions. They should be able to contribute to that dialogue. You've pointed out to us very remarkable and striking ways in which the world has changed in the 20th century. But of course, human nature doesn't seem to have changed very much in the 20th century. And in fact, the 20th century has shown us terrible ways in which human nature can be corrupted and distorted, and the dreadful deeds that flow from that. And we do need absolutely to address those problems. And that, I think, concentrates on human nature. And when we start on human nature, we are inevitably not talking just in general terms, but we're talking about individual people and their unique circumstances. And I think one of the difficulties that many scientists have is they're very used to thinking about things in general. And that's the power of science. Dirac's equation describes all the trillions upon trillions of electrons in the universe, an enormous, powerful generality. But of course, the sphere of the personal is always unique. We are unique people, we have unique experiences. And religious traditions, faith traditions, appeal to foundational, unique experiences, to the founder figures of that tradition that it may be. And I wonder how you as a scientist respond to religion's appeal to unique events and unique people. I mean, are you happy with that?
You know, I do not know how to answer the question. As science makes progress, and as I said, science did make amazing progress.
Absolutely.
Especially in the last 1 or 2 centuries. Yes. In some sense, science has become more powerful.
Yes.
And in fact, it is amazing how today mankind can manipulate things in nature in a way which is unimaginable even, let's say, 100 years ago.
Yes, absolutely.
But at the same time, while the power increases, the feeling of humbled feeling upon understanding some new deep things also increases. As you had mentioned before, there is the question, is there a grand design? Mm-hmm. Is there a purpose? Mm-hmm. And what is going to happen? Mm-hmm. As I said, I had always filled in when there's a form to fill with the item religious affiliation. I always said I'm an atheist. Mm-hmm. But when you understand something really subtle, really deep, the question necessarily comes up, how come?
Yes, yes.
If you ask me, would increase the dialogue between science and religion come up with an answer to such a question? I have to say I'm not sure. However, that does not mean that such conversations would be useless and should not take place. In fact, I like very much a sentence in a speech made by a friend and your friend, Freeman Dyson, when he accepted the Templeton Prize. He said that God is when the mind has reached its limits.
Yes, and I think we can only find out the degree of fruitfulness of the dialogue between science and religion by pursuing it. As in science, you investigate a regime, you don't know what's going to turn up, but you won't find anything if you don't go and look for it. There is a sort of natural cosmic religiosity, one might say, that goes with the science. This is the feeling of awe and so on that you express there so well, which Einstein, of course, frequently talked about. I remember him, in one of his places, he says, when he made his great discoveries, he felt like a child in the presence of the elders, that this wonderful order of the world was something that transcended finite human thinking. There is a natural... So that's a gift in a way, that the practice of science, I think, gives to scientists. But there's another experience in science which is, again, more ambiguous and it relates to the ethical questions that you raised. And that is, research is very exciting. And it's very easy to get carried away, I think, with the excitement of it, particularly in areas, at the moment, I think, and in the 21st century, the big developments, both in terms of scientific understanding and in terms of technological possibility, are going to be in the biological sciences, probably rather than the physical sciences. The amazing advances taking place in genetics offer great opportunities for healing, opportunities also for manipulation of human life in ways that are ethically dangerous. It's very easy in research to be carried away with the excitement of it, to have a sort of imperative, technological imperative. We've done this, we've done that, come on, let's do the next thing. But the next thing may not be the thing that should be done. So I think you need, I wonder what you think about this, you need a dialogue between the expert scientists and the general public, the religious public and the non-religious public, but the ethically concerned public, so that they are not carried away with the excitement, but they consider whether the next thing should be done or should not be done. It's very striking, I think. I'm sure you've read lots of the memoirs of people who worked at Los Alamos during the war, very great scientists who were there, perhaps the greatest concentration of scientific talent for a single purpose ever assembled. Most of them, it seems, didn't really ask themselves what they were doing until they saw the first test explosion. And then they felt differently about it. Oppenheimer said, didn't he? The science was very sweet, easy to get carried away. I'd be interested to know what you think about that.
You had mentioned that there is a common perception among many people that science and religion are contradictory. This is certainly not true. Science and religion have the same origin. The origin is the human desire to understand.
Absolutely.
Science and religion took different methods, different approaches, but the ultimate aim is really the same. If you look at what Newton wrote, you'll realize that of the thousands and thousands of pages of manuscript that people have collected of Newton's work, only a small fraction of it was about science. Most of it was about religion. I remember once I was visiting Wu Taishan in Shanxi, and I went to one of the temples. And the monk there asked me to write something on their visitor's book. So I had thought about it, and I wrote, science and religion was really, what I said in Chinese was...
You say it in Chinese, but somebody told me it's in English.
I don't know how to translate that. 科学与宗教本来是一家. The monk was very pleased.
I'm sure I would be pleased if I understood what you've written. Because I think we are thinking on the same lines there. This quest for understanding, the quest for truth as being fundamental human activity. It is interesting, isn't it, that the big sort of founding figures of modern science in the 17th and early 18th century were nearly all people for whom religion was also important. They may have had their difficulties with orthodox religious belief, as Newton certainly did. They may have their difficulties with the authorities, as of course Galileo notoriously did. Others were luckier in that respect, Robert Boyle or Kepler and so on. But they were all people who clearly wanted, as they used to say, read the two books, the book of nature and the book of scripture. And I think that we should remember that. I mean, one of the reasons why science and religion should be friends is that they were, there's a sense in which religious belief helped to be the sort of midwife to bring modern science to birth, I think, in that sort of way. I'd like to ask you another question, which you may think is a tangent, but I'm very interested in hearing what you say to it, and I'll explain why afterwards. I want to ask you what you think about mathematics. What's the nature of mathematics? Is it discovery or is it invention? Do mathematicians invent mathematics or do they find it? Did Mandelbrot invent the Mandelbrot set or did he discover it? What do you think about that? Sorry, it's a tangent question, but I'm very interested.
You always raise questions to me, and you know I cannot answer them. But it is important to raise such questions.
Thank you.
If you look at the dialogue between science and religion, if you ask me, what could religion learn from science? What could science learn from religion? I had thought about this last night. I would say that the example of Galileo was a very good example of what religion could learn from science.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
If there were more dialogue between religion and science, there would not have been that affair about Galileo several centuries ago.
Yeah.
And in fact, religion has recognized that.
Yeah.
What could science teach? What could religion teach science? What immediately comes to mind is that religion could teach scientists to be less arrogant. It is a truth that as science produces more and more powerful results, there is a tendency for a number of the scientists to become arrogant, which I'm sure everybody agrees is not appropriate. Furthermore, the power that is created by scientific progress, as I tried to demonstrate earlier, could lead to disastrous consequences. And that is where more thoughtfulness should come in. And that's where religion could play an important role.
Thank you. The reason I asked that question about mathematics, I believe that mathematics is discovery. And most mathematicians believe that mathematics is discovery, whether they're religious people or not. And I think if that's right, it's a very interesting thing, because it means there is a dimension of reality, a noetic dimension, you might call it, of the reality, namely the world of mathematical entities, to which we have access, which is clearly different from the material world, though related to it because of the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. So that it begins to enhance, I think, our understanding of the richness of the reality within which we live. We are, of course, material beings, but we are also, as Pascal said, we are thinking reeds, and we have this access to this world of this amazing world of both of mathematics and of human thought. Do you think we should find out what they think out there?
So it's now time to invite questions and comments from the floor. And to allow more questions, would you please keep your questions short, within 1 minute now? And when you When you ask, will you please introduce yourself by giving your name and affiliations? Now, the gentleman over there.
I'm from mainland China. I'm a master of the communication school. There's two questions. First, I speak in English.
That helps communication, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Okay. We talk about a lot about the religion, and I think it's some kind of the ideal knowledge. And just now, Professor Yang told us that the religion and the science, they have both the original, and they have the same original. And on some level, I agree with you. And my question is, do you think the Marxists and the Marxists and that with the Communist Party, they believe that the Marxists, do you think the Marxists, the science and the religion, they have both the original? Do you think so? And the second question is, a lot of persons in mainland, they don't believe religion. They have no religion. And they also have a lot of outstanding researchers there. Do you think they need to believe religion or not? If they believe one of the religion, maybe it can be improvement their
Can I just make a quick response to that? I'll make an empirical response. Of course, I mean, obviously I don't share Marxist understanding of the nature of religion. And I think there's some empirical evidence to suggest that Marxism is not a total explanation of history or of human nature. That's one thing I'd want to say. The other thing is, of course, you don't need to be a religious person to do science. I mean, obviously there are people of the greatest scientific eminence who are convinced atheists. Sometimes some of them very militant atheists. You don't need to be religious to do science. But that doesn't mean to say that there may not be a hidden undergirding of the order of the world which originates in the mind of God.
I'm not a student of Marxism. I, of course, know something as a layman. I understand Marxism was considered a deep economic theory. And in fact, some people believe he should have won a Nobel Prize in economics. As to Marxism as a philosophy, I am not qualified to make any statements about it. You mentioned the question of religion and the Chinese government policies. That is a very sensitive and a very important subject. It is my belief that that is deeply a question that the Chinese government is very anxious to find solutions to. And I'm sure that is also a question that the Vatican is paying a lot of attention to.
Okay, the gentleman over there with a pair of spectacles. Yeah.
Dr. Polkinghorne, as you have mentioned about unseen reality, and perhaps I can see some kind of unseen reality, and I would like to introduce myself. I'm only one of the ordinary audience from Hong Kong, and I'm not very well educated. I'm almost one of the illiterate only. What I can see is that at birth of everyone, every newborn baby brings along parents, gender, date and place of birth, mother tongue, ethnic race, and color of skin. All of this was given to anyone, everyone. No one can choose, change, and reject. Life lasting. Do you think, is this legal or illegal? Assuming that I'm forcing someone as a hostage right here to work something for me without the consent of this person, is this legal or illegal? So we have to find out and discuss and further research what kind of civilization can we see ever since we have the first person on earth up to now? Thank you.
Well, I share the Kantian view that human beings, each human being, is an end and not a means, and are entitled to deep ethical respect that recognizes that. And that, again, is a common I've had a certain amount of amateur engagement with medical ethics issues in the United Kingdom, been on various government committees and things. And that has been, I think, a common denominator among the people wrestling with these problems, whether they came from a religious background or not. So again, there are things that we share in that sort of way. So certainly, people are entitled to individual liberty. That doesn't mean that there are not restrictions that society can rightly place on people's activities, clearly. But
we have another question from...
Thank you so much for what you've given. I have a question to follow Dr. Polkinghorne's quotation of Pascal.
Is your microphone working?
Yes, I think. Is it? Yes. Is it on now? Ah, okay. Excuse me. Your quotation of Blaise Pascal goes on to say that humans are those who think, yes, and the universe does not. But humans will die, and they know they will die, but the universe does not know anything of it. And so Pascal goes on to say, the question is not only to think, but to think well. And I want to ask both of you, how do we face death? No, seriously, how do we face death in the light of science and religion? And how, in the light of that, do we think well because of it? Because I believe that Professor Yang, talking about anxiety and our uncertainties, is thinking about death and knows we will die, and that we need to know how to think well.
Okay.
Well, can I again kick off? Thank you very much for extending that Pascal quotation. I either didn't know that or I'd forgotten it. I do think the question of death is a very serious question, and one that I think everybody thinks about. Some people think about it every day. Other people are able to dismiss it. But I think it's a question that faces all of us. Every story that science tells, every horizontal story, you might say, in terms of scientific understanding, ends in death of one form or another. The universe is going to die on a very much longer time scale than you and I. So in the end, if the scientific story is the only story to tell, the universe ends in futility. And that's why another common friend of ours, the distinguished Nobel Prize-winning physicist Steven Weinberg, said that the more he understood the universe, the more it seemed pointless. In the end, it's just going to end in futility. But I believe, of course, there's another story to be told, the vertical story of that religion and theology tells, which is the story of God's faithfulness. And I think the only ground for the hope, human hope, of a destiny beyond death lies in the faithfulness of God. It's exactly the point that Jesus made. We had an argument about this. He said, God is the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, not of the dead, but of the living. In other words, the patriarchs matter to God, and God's faithful. They're not going to be thrown away. They will have some sort of destiny. And I believe we have, because I believe that destiny is linked with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The big Christian story to tell about that. But if we don't have some transcendental story to tell beyond the horizontal story of science, then death is the finish.
I think it's been clearly proven today that
will you
you can
introduce
see.
yourself by giving your name?
My name is Wong. I come from the business community. I think it's clearly proven today that you can see the glory of God in all the equations that describe the physical world. For me personally, it's a Schrödinger equation that I admire. But seeing this only states to us that there is a magnificent creator, that the equations and the mathematics underlying it tells you the magnificence of the creator. My question then is, how do you get from this large-scale picture to something as specific as the resurrection?
That way, but you can't learn everything that way. In particular, the picture of God that it will give you will not be more than a picture of God as the great mathematician or the cosmic architect or something like that. Not to be despised, but I think there's more to know about God than that. And that's why I asked the question about the unique as opposed to the general. If there is some truth, as I believe, of course, there is, in the Christian understanding of, in fact, the Abrahamic faith's understanding of God as being, in some sense, personal. I mean, as far as we can use human language, he's not an old man in the sky, but it's less misleading to call God a person than to call God a force. Then we'll have to take the risk of entering into personal experience and evaluating personal experience with the ambiguities and also the enhanced potentialities that brings. And that means that the reasons for my Christian faith lie, and of course I can't possibly develop this thought, lie in the way I encounter the figure of Jesus Christ in the scriptures, in the church, and in the sacraments. And that's why, for me, individual experience is an indispensable component. I think in everybody's worldview, but certainly in a Christian worldview.
Okay, time really flies. I think I can only have one more question. I think it's this.
Thank you very much. I'm Perry So, I'm a conductor. So I really appreciated your comment about music. Just one question about you evoked the idea of verisimilitude really wonderfully. Do you think that this is, in pursuing this dialogue further between science and religion, do you feel that verisimilitude can become perhaps, as it always has in the past, a point of contention between the two sides in the methods that they use, in the types of dialogues that they choose to engage in? Meaning that I feel that to some extent you're speaking about metaphor, the extension of imagination in such a way to encompass greater amounts of the real world that we can encompass. Do you feel that there is a fundamental disagreement between the two as to what constitutes realism and the object of this inquiry? Thank you.
Well, can I say something about that? Or you say something about it?
I am not sure that realism is something which Dr. Polkinghorne or I had in mind when we were talking about the necessity to have more dialogue between science and religion. Reality is a question which has been debated in academic physics in the 20th century. In particular, it is one of the unending disputes between Einstein and Heisenberg and Bohr. But that is another subject which may or may not have anything to do with the subject matter that we are concentrating on this afternoon.
Well, I don't quite agree with that. To me, realism, the issue of realism is a very important issue in science and in religion, and I think in some sense, a common issue between the two. I'm a critical realist in the sense, both in my understanding of the nature of science and also my understanding of the nature of theology. And verisimilitude, or something like it, is an indispensable concept for theology. I mean, we realize that the infinite reality of God will never be adequately caught in finite human speech. Every image of God, in some sense, is an idol and has to be broken. There's a strong, as I'm sure you know, there's a strong tradition called apophatic theology, which says that we can know what God is not, but not what God is. Aquinas it's very strong in the Eastern Church, but also in the Western Church. Aquinas took that point of view. So that that doesn't mean to say we can't know anything. Again, I mean, quote another theological hero of mine, Augustine. Augustine, talking about the Trinity, said 3 whats? He said 3 persons. We say that because we have to say something rather than be silent, but we know we're not getting the whole story. So I think there is a concept, very important concept of verisimilitude in theology, just as there is in science. Final remark about music. One of my favorite quotations. George Steiner, who's a celebrated literary critic, wrote a very interesting book called Real Presences about creativity. And there, somewhere in that book, he says, the matter of music is central to the issues of metaphysics. In other words, if your worldview does not give an adequate characterization of the human experience of music, you have missed the point.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not going to eat my own words right now because there are too many people indicating that they want to ask a question, and I'm afraid the last question I have to go to our president, Professor Ng, because he has been indicating for quite a while and I missed it.
Sorry for this privilege. Well, I would like to put a question to Reverend Polkinghorne. You mentioned the phenomenon of circularity in science.
Right.
That is, whenever new discovery from experimental results, the theory need to be modified if it cannot explain the facts. Is it also true that there is a circularity in theology? And you also mentioned evolution, and obviously, you are using a new interpretation of evolution. Now, in that case, circularity is also a phenomenon in theology. Is it not true?
Yes, I certainly wouldn't wish to give the impression I think science is circular and theology is absolutely straight and to the point. I think all human knowledge actually is, to a degree, precarious. I think we don't have certain knowledge in the absolute sense. I mean, Gödel has shown us that even mathematics is not logically complete. So that if that's true of mathematics, it will surely be true of science and even more so of religion. The philosopher of science I am influenced by the most is Michael Polanyi, who was, of course, a distinguished scientist before he became a philosopher. And when he wrote his great book, Personal Knowledge, about science, he said in the preface, I am writing this book to explain how I may commit myself to what I believe to be true, knowing that it might be false. And that, I think, is the human condition. And that is certainly the condition of the religious person. That is why we walk by faith and not by sight. Faith is not irrational belief, but it is commitment to a rationally motivated form of belief, but it is not absolute certainty beyond a peradventure. That's the human condition, in my view.
With this wonderful answer, the Q&A time and the dialogue draw into a conclusion. Please join me in giving a good thank to Professor Polkinghorne and Professor
What a wonderful feast this afternoon. We began this event with the welcoming remarks from the chairman of our council of the university, and we're going to conclude it with some closing remark by the president and vice chancellor of our university, Professor Ng, please.
I'd like to thank Professor Dr. Polkinghorne and also Professor Young for the very enlightening and inspiring sharing. You have heard PC talk about overture, Act 1, Act 2. Now this is the prologue. And this must be the worst part of it. All right. Distinguished guests, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you will agree with me that we had a tremendous session on a topic which has for centuries really for all people who search for knowledge to reflect on. And first I must say, we Hong Kong BU are very proud of staging this dialogue today. Now, in a way, it really amplifies the mission of our institution to inculcate in all a sense of value beyond mere acquisition of knowledge. So thank you very much, Professor Young and Professor Polkinghorne, for giving us such a nice dialogue this afternoon.
Now, as Dr. Polkinghorne has mentioned in his talk, there has to be genuine intellectual exchange between all parts of the academy, a form of interdisciplinary discourse by means of which all will be enriched. Now, this is indeed something we cannot agree more. And in fact, it must be a noble objective for any institution who claim to be a first rate. We are not exception. And this also reminds me of the Chinese proverb, 殊途同歸, 殊途同歸. Literally means different roads may lead to the same destiny. Now, of course, the closest Western saying would be all roads lead to Rome. But here, there's a subtle difference between the East and West. But this is not for us to discuss today. You can think about it. Now, put in the context of today's dialogue, the quest for an understanding of the universe and beyond in itself can be expressed in numerous forms. It seems to me everybody in the audience agree. And among these forms, science and theology are one of them. Now, and I also feel today's dialogue is something, it really touched the fundamental of the human mind. Now, as Prof. Yang said, as he grows old, he also has different perspective. I'm also getting old too. But no one, perhaps still a few paces behind Prof. Yang. But I don't think it's just the matter of getting old. Because whoever tried to quest for knowledge, you will always ask the ultimate question. And I think this is almost unavoidable. And that is why the dialogue between the two masters are so exciting today. Now, time's pretty close to 7, so I must conclude by just a few more words. I think Hong Kong, with its cosmopolitan background, accommodates various cultures, including religious beliefs. And as such, it really provides an ideal setting for the study and exchange of all with an inquiring mind. The fact that the East joyfully meets the West in today's Hong Kong sets the scene for dialogues of many possible themes between the two hemispheres. And today, we are really witness one, and a very remarkable one indeed. So I hope this kind of dialogue will continue to take place in Hong Kong, and we continue to enjoy the visits of people like Professor Polkinghorne and Professor Yang. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and welcome to Hong Kong BU. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Ng. We have thanked the two speakers before, and many times I don't want to repeat it, but I want to thank the audience. Your enthusiastic presence humbled us. We're deeply moved. Thank you for coming. In the future, we'll host similar events. So if you want to be notified, please leave your name card as you make your way out. Thank you for coming once again. Thank you very much.